They thought standing alone meant weakness, but in the spirit it became your weapon. You stood when others bowed. You believed when others mocked. You built an altar out of silence and turned your loneliness into fire. The world fears you because you expose their counterfeit strength. Crowds hide in numbers, but you chosen one. You carried a faith that stripped the mask off their fear. Your shadow stretched further than their armies. Your stillness made noise louder than their chants. You didn't beg for validation. You became the validation. While they ran to hide behind popularity, you hid yourself in God, and that became the most dangerous secret. For your faith has become a mirror. When they see you, they see their unbelief. When they watch you endure, their excuses collapse. That's why they hate you, because your silence judges louder than their sermons. They can't understand why you didn't fold, why you didn't crave their approval, why you didn't break when they pushed you to the edge. But heaven understands. Heaven wrote your resilience into the story of destiny. You were not built to be part of the crowd. You were built to expose it. The fact that you stood alone means you have stepped into the chamber reserved for prophets, warriors, kings who walked without applause yet carried eternal crowns. This is why demons whispered against you. This is why systems rejected you. Because when you refused to compromise, you activated a dimension of power hidden from ordinary men. You became the warning sign, the living proof that faith is not fragile, it is a fortress. And now the secret is out. Your stillness was not weakness, it was preparation. Your patience was not delay, it was judgment. You became the prophecy they didn't see coming. You chose the narrow road, and in doing so you embarrassed every wide gate they built. You shamed their idols by refusing to bow. You crushed their intimidation by refusing to yield. Standing alone in faith was never about surviving. It was about exposing every counterfeit foundation. Now the fear shifts. It is no longer your fear of being abandoned. It is their fear of facing what you carry. Because when God himself steps forward as shield, every enemy must retreat. They don't see you anymore. They see the fire. They don't touch you anymore. They touch the Almighty. And this is the mystery. Your aloneness became the place of his arrival. What you bore in silence is now thunder in the spirit. What you carried in shadows is now a banner before nations. Your isolation was the birthing room of awakening, and now, chosen one. You are not just covered, you are untouchable. You thought it was just loneliness. You thought it was just isolation. But in the spirit, you were standing in a battlefield that few ever see. This is not silence. This is a divine courtroom. This is where heaven and hell watch to see who you will become. When you stood alone, you were not just pacing a dark room, you were standing in the arena where angels and demons measure the weight of your decision. Every tear became testimony. Every prayer became evidence. Every refusal to bow became a prophetic warning that you are not like the rest. Darkness tried to whisper, tried to break you with lies, because your stillness was exposing their weakness. Demons don't waste energy on the empty, they only circle those carrying treasure. And you, chosen one, you were carrying a prophetic inheritance that terrified the unseen. So the enemy sent signals, testing, pressing, secretly hoping you would collapse. But you didn't. You held on. And while you thought no one noticed, heaven was watching. The hosts of angels stood at attention, not to rescue you too soon, but to see if your faith could be trusted with authority. They surrounded you in silence, testing if your loyalty was to applause or to God alone. They could have intervened instantly, but intervention without testing would have left you fragile. So they stood back. They let the fire heat you. They let the storm circle you. Because faith untested cannot stand as a shield for others. Your heart became the scale of justice. Every thought weighed, every motive measured. While the crowd laughed, heaven recorded. While your enemies mocked, the Spirit wrote your endurance into eternal archives. And do you know what was happening? Your decisions were echoing in two realms. In the earth, they saw a person standing alone. But in the spirit, they saw a warrior passing trial by fire. What you endured secretly is now resounding publicly in the courts of angels. The book of Job whispered your name. Hebrews 11 nodded in recognition. You joined the ranks of those who stood firm, not receiving the promise, yet carrying the vision. Chosen one, you became a prophetic case study. Heaven said, let us watch this one. Let us prove that someone can still be faithful with no support, with no applause, with no safety net. Hell said, strike them, tempt them, isolate them, and they will break. But you didn't. You proved that love is stronger than betrayal. You proved that destiny is heavier than delay. You proved that awakening cannot be suffocated by silence. Every step you took alone was not just survival, it was a verdict. It was a ruling in the unseen courtroom that your life carries eternal weight. Your ancestors leaned in. Those who prayed before you, those who carried the bloodline forward, they watched as you shattered patterns they could not. Their unfinished prayers became your hidden strength. Their silent cries became the wind at your back. You thought it was weakness, it was inheritance. You carried generations in your bones, and heaven honored it. Demons tried to frighten you because they knew your breakthrough was not just for you, it was for everyone connected to you. That's why the battle was so heavy, because your victory would ripple backward and forward, healing what came before and protecting what comes after. Every step became a shockwave. Every lonely night became a trumpet in the spirit. You didn't see it, but walls were shaking, strongholds were cracking, hidden systems of control were trembling because of your refusal to bow. When you kept standing, chains broke in places you've never seen. When you chose prayer over panic, demons screamed in frustration. When you held faith in silence, the atmosphere tilted. You thought you were small, but the earth felt the tremor of your endurance. This is why God now stands before you as shield. Because you endured the testing ground. You passed the silent exam. You proved you could carry what others dropped. And now the same unseen courtroom that tested you is announcing you. Angels that once stood silent now surround you in open defense. The darkness that once mocked you now trembles because it knows your faith has been weighed and found unshakable. What happened in hiddenness is about to be revealed. You did not walk alone. You walked as a sign. Your loneliness was not abandonment, it was consecration. You stood as a single flame, and that flame has now been recognized as a beacon and chosen one. Every secret step you took in faith is about to manifest as a public shield of glory. You thought you were outnumbered. You thought you had no backup. But what God was proving is this: faith alone, pure and undiluted, carries more power than an entire army moving in fear. One believer with conviction shakes more ground than 10,000 voices with doubt. Because armies can march, but they can also scatter. Crowds can shout, but they can also fall silent. Yet one heart locked in God does not move. It does not bend. It does not negotiate. And that single heart becomes a fortress. Remember Gideon. 32,000 men looked impressive, but God stripped them down to 300. Why? To prove that numbers don't carry victory, obedience does. One David ran toward Goliath while Israel's entire army hid behind rocks. One Esther stood in prayer and saved a nation. One Jesus walked to a cross, and the world itself shifted on its axis. Heaven has always used the few to embarrass the many. And now heaven has chosen you. Your solitary faith is heavier than their combined fear. Your whispered prayer shakes more than their thunderous chants. Because faith aligns with heaven, fear aligns with hell. The crowd carries energy, but you carry authority. The mob reacts, but you create. And when you stand alone, your stand becomes a signal. Angels rally to the sound of conviction. Demons scatter at the vibration of belief. Your aloneness became a summoning. It was not weakness, it was strategy. Armies can be bribed. Crowds can be manipulated. Leaders can be overthrown. But what do you do with one soul that refuses to quit? What do you do with someone who doesn't flinch when left alone? That is the terror of hell, that no matter how many they gather, no matter how loud they shout, they cannot move one person anchored in God. one who knows the secret that the Lord himself is a wall of fire around them. This is why they underestimated you. They thought the absence of support meant the end of you, but they didn't realize that every voice that left only purified yours. Every friend that abandoned only revealed your source. Every weapon that failed to kill you only confirmed your destiny. The fewer you had, the stronger you became. Because heaven does not multiply by addition. Heaven multiplies by subtraction. And when the dust settled, what looked like weakness became a weapon. Chosen one, hear this warning. The enemy's strategy has always been intimidation by numbers. He wants you to think more equal, stronger. But the secret is this: purity of faith outweighs quantity of followers. You don't need a crowd to validate your vision. You don't need applause to seal your assignment. When you stand in alignment with the Almighty, you outnumber every army, even if you are standing alone. Your faith has become a fortress. Your conviction has become a kingdom. And now, even as nations rage, even as voices rise, you are standing as a prophetic rebuke to the lie of power in numbers. You are heaven's answer to fear. You are the hidden equation the enemy didn't calculate. Because one flame that refuses to die will ignite the whole forest. One stone in a sling can topple a giant. One cross can redeem creation. And one chosen one standing in faith is greater than an empire built on sand. This is why God has placed his shield before you now. Because you proved what no army could prove. You stood when others fell. You believed when others bowed. You carried the torch of faith into the night. And now heaven declares you are not one against many. You are one with the Almighty, which makes you greater than all who oppose. When no one stood beside you, something deeper was happening than what eyes could see. In the silence of your loneliness, the spirit world was shifting. Your faith was being refined like golden fire. Every moment you refused to quit was a hammer strike on the anvil of your soul. The furnace did not consume you, it consecrated you. And while people saw emptiness, heaven saw endurance. While they judged your isolation, angels recorded your obedience. This is the hidden transaction of solitude. Your weakness burned away, leaving only pure flame. Fear melted, pride dissolved, approval lost its grip, and what remained was a heart so aligned with God that even hell could not counterfeit it. Your steadfastness became incense. It rose like a fragrance before the throne. What others called abandonment, God called altar. That is why your tears carried power. They were not wasted water. They were seeds watering the soil of destiny. In those nights of silence, you entered realms few are invited into. You began to sense whispers others ignore. You felt the tremors of spiritual warfare that others sleep through. Your ears tuned to the frequency of heaven. That's why distractions broke off you. That's why compromise could not seduce you. Because you were hearing a higher call, a call hidden to crowds but revealed to the faithful remnant. Chosen one, your solitude became your seminary. Your wilderness became your classroom. Every unanswered prayer trained your patience. Every delay sharpened your discernment. Every betrayal tuned your spirit to detect the counterfeit. You were learning what crowds can never teach: how to hear God in the dark. That's why your silence became dangerous. Because it birthed revelation. It birthed prophecy. It birthed discernment sharper than any sword. Understand this in the spirit. Every lonely step shook invisible walls. Demons trembled not because you shouted, but because you didn't collapse. Angels rejoiced not because you fought with fists, but because you stood with faith. That stand sent ripples through the unseen realm. You may not have felt it, but in the spirit dimension, earthquakes broke open. Shackles snapped off generations, and hidden chains disintegrated. Every step you took sent shockwaves that will be felt for years to come. Your heart became the scale of justice. Heaven weighed your loyalty. Hell tested your limits, and still you remained. You became a living verdict. Faith still works. Trust still triumphs. God still reigns. That is why the spirit world takes you seriously now. You are no longer just someone who believes you are someone who proved it under fire. That proof became your authority. That proof became your shield. That proof became your crown. You didn't just survive, you shifted atmospheres. You didn't just endure, you prophesied through your silence. Your life declared, though none go with me, still I will follow. And all of heaven responded, this one is mine. Your aloneness was never punishment, it was initiation. It was your entrance exam into a kingdom where few dare to tread. And now, every demon that mocked your tears fears your presence. Every angel that watched your pain now honors your rank. Because when you stood steadfast with no one beside you, the spirit realm crowned you quietly. And that crown is about to be revealed openly. You wondered why God didn't rescue you sooner, why he let the storm rage, why the attacks came without immediate relief. But the truth is hidden in the divine order. Protection comes after endurance, not before. Faith must be tested before it is crowned. If God shielded you too early, the testimony would not carry weight, but by allowing the fire, he proved your authenticity. By letting the storm press against you, he revealed your roots. By delaying rescue, he turned your endurance into undeniable evidence. Chosen one. God was not ignoring you. He was validating you. Heaven will not invest shield power in a vessel that cracks under pressure. That's why he let you stand alone. He let you prove to principalities and powers that your allegiance was not for sale. Only then could he step forward as your defense. His silence was not abandonment. It was courtroom protocol. He let the trial play out so that when he intervened, no voice could dispute the verdict. Think of Job, Satan said. He only serves you because you protect him. God lifted the hedge and let the testing come. Why? To silence the accuser once and for all. To prove Job's faith was real. To demonstrate that loyalty is not built on blessings, but on covenant. The same pattern unfolded in you. When the hedge felt lifted, when attacks came unfiltered, heaven was watching the accuser fail. Every day you refused to curse God became another nail in hell's coffin. Protection delayed became protection multiplied. When God finally steps forward as shield, it is not fragile defense, it is unbreakable covering. Because it is built on proven faith. Anyone can shout when surrounded by angels. Few can stand when the angels stay silent. That's why you carry rank others don't. That's why your testimony pierces deeper. Because you didn't just believe in comfort, you believed in the fire. You trusted without evidence. And that kind of trust becomes a legal contract in the unseen. God's timing was perfect. If he had shielded you too soon, the mockers would claim it was luck. If he had silenced your enemies instantly, they would say you escaped by chance. But because you endured, because you stood without visible help, when he finally appeared, it became undeniable. The enemy cannot argue with the one who survived the storm. Your endurance shut every mouth. Your steadfastness burned every excuse. And now his shield stands not just as defense, but as vindication. Chosen one. His delay was your preparation. His silence was your consecration. His waiting was your proving ground. Every minute you felt unguarded was actually heaven setting the stage for eternal testimony. When he finally arrived, it was not to protect the weak, it was to crown the faithful. That is why you now walk with authority. That is why attacks bounce off you. That is why the enemy trembles when your name is whispered. Because God himself stands before you now, and he will not retreat. The shield came after, because the shield is not just for you. It is for the generations watching, for the angels recording, for the nations that will know faith is stronger than fear. You proved yourself in the dark, so now he covers you in the light. When God stands before you as shield, it is no longer theory. It is no longer just scripture on a page. It becomes reality. It means every arrow aimed at you must first collide with him. It means the trap laid in secret collapses under divine weight before it ever touches your feet. It means the curse sent your way reverses back on its sender, not because you fought, but because he fought. This is not abstract protection, it is a living wall of fire, a shield so radiant that darkness cannot even approach without burning. When God stands before you as shield, accusations lose their teeth, lies turn to dust, The words they whispered in hidden rooms are dismantled before they can ever reach your ears. Their schemes rot before they ripen. Their networks collapse before they converge. You are no longer exposed to the same blows you once endured, because his presence has shifted position. He is not just behind you as comfort. He is before you as defense. The Lion of Judah is your front line. The Alpha is your armor. The Almighty is your visible deterrent. Chosen one. This means you walk in a different authority now. Fear is no longer your portion. Anxiety no longer rules your nights. You are no longer waiting to see how bad it gets, because the worst has already been intercepted. When God stands as shield, he does not just block, he blinds your enemies. He scrambles their signals. He confuses their maps. He throws their camp into chaos. What was once a targeted strike turns into misfire. What was once a coordinated plot dissolves into self-destruction. They fight each other instead of you, because heaven has stepped between. And here is the mystery. His shield is not passive. It does not simply absorb blows. It radiates glory. It projects light. It announces that you are untouchable property. Every step you take is covered. Every word you speak is charged. Every breath you breathe is guarded. The danger you once lived under is now redirected. Your life is no longer in the hands of systems, governments, or hidden enemies. Your life is wrapped in the armor of the eternal. This is the fulfillment of Psalm 91. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You are living under covenant armor. His faithfulness, not your striving, is the barrier. His word, not your effort, is the wall. His presence, not your strategy, is the defense line. This is why you don't collapse anymore. This is why fear feels foreign now. Because the shield is not an idea, it is himself standing in front of you. Understand this prophetic warning when God becomes shield. To strike you is to strike him. To curse you is to curse him. To challenge you is to provoke the Almighty. That is why your enemies tremble. They are no longer facing your humanity. They are colliding with divinity. This is why attacks are failing. This is why slander falls flat. This is why you remain standing when others collapse. Because the weight that once pressed against you now presses against those who oppose. Chosen one. This is your reality now. You walk shielded. You walk hidden. You walk untouchable. And you will never again fight alone. Because the shield of heaven has taken his place before you. Chosen one. Notice this: God did not say he would stand before you as a sword. He said he would stand as a shield. A sword speaks of attack, of striking, of advancing with blood. But a shield speaks of presence, of covering, of survival against overwhelming force. A sword requires you to swing. A shield requires you to stand. And when God calls himself your shield, he is telling you the greatest power is not in striking. It is in standing unshaken while every arrow breaks before it reaches you. A sword demands energy. A shield demands endurance. Anyone can fight when they feel strong, but only the chosen can remain when the battle feels endless. That is why your strength is not measured in how many you cut down, but in how many storms you outlast. The shield teaches patience. It teaches trust. It teaches you that God fights for you, not just through you. It reminds you that victory is not always in attacking, it is in not being moved. The sword is offensive. The shield is defensive. But defense in God's kingdom is not weakness, it is strategy. For what good is a sword if the warrior falls from lack of protection? What good is an army if their hearts are exposed to fear? That is why Ephesians 6 says, above all, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Notice above all, not the sword first, but the shield. Because without the shield, the sword becomes useless. Without protection, even the strongest warrior falls. Chosen one. Hear this hidden truth: God chose shield because his plan was to demonstrate your survival, not your aggression. The enemy wanted to provoke you into endless fighting, but God wanted to reveal your invincibility. They thought they could drain you by constant attack, They thought they could wear you out, but the shield made their effort empty. Their arrows became confetti at your feet, their swords dulled against the invisible wall. Your very survival became their humiliation. Understand the prophetic warning in this: the shield is not glamorous. It doesn't always look impressive. Others don't see the invisible wall and think you are exposed. But what they don't know is that everything sent against you has already shattered before it touched you. What looked like weakness was divine strength. What looked like silence was loud in the spirit. You didn't need to swing a blade because God Himself intercepted the strike. This is love's strategy, to show that gentleness is stronger than violence, to show that stillness breaks chaos, to show that standing in faith embarrasses the enemy more than swinging in fear. God could have made you a sword, but He made Himself your shield, because He wanted the world to see that survival by grace is more powerful than conquest by might. And here is the secret: the shield doesn't just block, it reflects. Every curse sent at you bounces back. Every attack rebounds. Every strike circles back on the sender. You didn't have to retaliate because the shield turned their warfare into their downfall. Chosen one. This is why He revealed Himself as shield, because He wanted you to know that your destiny is not to exhaust yourself fighting every battle. Your destiny is to stand, guarded, untouchable, while heaven absorbs the arrows and converts them into testimony. You don't need to prove your power, you need only to remain. Chosen one. When God steps forward as shield, your enemies do not simply fail, they unravel. Every arrow they release turns traitor and flies back into their own camp. Every trap they design caves in on their own heads. They swing their swords and strike the wind. They plot in shadows only to find themselves exposed in the light. What was once confidence becomes confusion. What was once strategy becomes chaos. Because they are not fighting you anymore, they are colliding with the Almighty. When He stands as shield, your name becomes dangerous to touch. To speak against you is to choke on their own words. To rise against you is to stumble before they move. Their networks fragment, their alliances fracture, friends turn on each other, secrets leak. They don't understand why everything is falling apart, but it is because they aimed at you while heaven was in front of you. Their battle was never against flesh, it was against the presence of God Himself. This is why the Word says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Weapons can be formed, attacks can be designed, but when God shields you, those weapons backfire. They still build them, but they fail. They still gather, but they scatter. They still plan, but they collapse under their own blueprints. Their rage becomes their ruin. Their lies become their chains. Their curses become their funerals. Your enemies experience fear they cannot name. They sense something invisible standing in their way. They feel their own strength dissolve in their hands. They see doors slam that were once open. They hear whispers in the night telling them, "This one is untouchable." They cannot explain why every scheme turns sour, but it is because the shield has turned your battle into God's battle. And when God fights, none can stand. Chosen one. Hear this prophetic truth: your enemies thought they were contending with you. They didn't realize they were walking into divine jurisdiction. They thought they could outsmart a person. They didn't know they were provoking a king, and not just any king, the King of Kings. So their attacks are not just failing, they are testifying. Every attempt that collapses is proof that you are chosen. Every strike that misses is proof you are covered. Every plan that implodes is proof that God Himself has taken His place in front of you. What do your enemies experience? Exhaustion, frustration, shame. They spend resources and see nothing. They invest energy and reap emptiness. They try to build cases against you, but end up building altars for your vindication. They gather evidence only for it to disappear. They try to curse you, but only curse themselves. They are now haunted by their own failures. Because when God is shield, every blow rebounds, and every rebound carries weight sevenfold. So they grow afraid of your silence. They grow unsettled by your peace. They wonder why you walk unbothered. They sense you are covered by something they cannot pierce. Their fear is the announcement of your protection. Their trembling is the confirmation of your authority. Their downfall is the evidence of your destiny. Chosen one. Your enemies are not just losing, they are learning. They are learning the warning written into your life. Do not touch what God has shielded. Do not fight what heaven has crowned, because when the shield is in place, to strike you is to strike God himself, and no one survives that collision. Chosen one, do you realize what it actually means that God himself has stepped before you as shield? This is not casual mercy. This is not random protection. This is strategic warfare at the highest level. Heaven does not waste resources. The armies of angels do not surround those with no significance. Every battle you endured, every lonely night that felt unbearable, every wave of attack that tried to drown you was not proof of your weakness. It was proof of your role. You are not just surviving. You are standing in the middle of a cosmic blueprint, a divine chessboard where your placement determines the next movement of history. You are not simply a believer, you are evidence, a prophetic sign carved into time, a living warning that God still interrupts bloodlines, still disrupts systems, still plants his chosen ones in the very places hell thought it had already secured. This is why the fire pressed you so violently, because your existence threatens the very foundations of generational patterns. Demons do not gather around the ordinary. They do not whisper curses at empty vessels. They swarm around the one carrying the oil, the one whose obedience has the power to unhinge doors that were sealed shut for centuries. And that one is you. Your life is not small. Your story is not private. You are the hinge of 1,000 prayers prayed long before your birth. You are the completion of assignments your ancestors could not finish, and the opening of roads for descendants not yet born. That is why your enemies felt ancient, why your warfare felt older than you, because you were never fighting only for yourself. You were carrying the unfinished business of heaven in your bones. You were born as interruption, as divine interference, as prophetic collision with the plans of darkness. And God as shield is the announcement that hell's access has been revoked. Your assignment is not to live safe. Your assignment is to live as evidence. You are the courtroom exhibit that faith still works. You are the proof that trust in God still silences the accuser. You are the dangerous contradiction that in a world where everyone bows to fear, one soul still kneels only before the throne of the Almighty. This is why God covers you so aggressively, because you are not optional. You are not replaceable. You are essential. If you fall, generations stumble. If you quit, the blueprint collapses. If you break, promises written over your lineage remain buried. But because you stood, because you refused to betray the oil in your spirit, because you endured when no one applauded, you have become the breach breaker, the pattern shatterer, the chosen flame that proves love is stronger than betrayal. Destiny is heavier than delay, and awakening cannot be suffocated by silence. God shields you not only for you, but for the ripple that flows out of you. Your protection is a prophetic investment. Heaven is not only keeping you alive, it is preserving the testimonies attached to your survival. That is why your enemies are so frustrated. They cannot touch you because touching you is touching an entire divine project. They cannot erase you because erasing you would erase a whole wave of freedom meant to be released through your life. So they rage, they lie, they plot, but every scheme collapses because the verdict has already been issued. This one belongs to God. This one is shielded. This one is non-negotiable. Chosen one, you are not just a person of faith. You are the very interruption of darkness written into the story of your bloodline. And the fact that the Almighty himself has stepped in as shield proves it once and for all. Your destiny is not fragile. It is fortified, and your role is not ordinary. It is eternal. Chosen one. Now that you know the Almighty himself has stepped before you as shield, how should you live? Not timidly, not apologetically, not as though you are still waiting for permission to exist. You respond by shifting the way you carry yourself. Because when heaven covers you, you cannot walk like someone who is still unprotected. You no longer bow to intimidation. You no longer explain away your anointing. You no longer water down your authority to make others comfortable. Your first response is rest in the knowledge that you are untouchable. Rest in the confidence that every battle is pre-decided. Rest in the truth that no arrow can bypass the shield of God. This does not mean laziness. It means no longer wasting energy fighting shadows that fall before they reach you. The second response is gratitude. Not the kind of shallow thankfulness that fades after a victory, but the deep, trembling gratitude that recognizes the cost of divine intervention. Every day you wake up alive. Every night you sleep in peace. Every trap that vanishes before it touches you, that is your altar of thanksgiving. The third response is focus, because protection is not given for comfort. It is given for assignment. When God shields you, it is not so you can hide. It is so you can advance. You are free to pour your energy into your purpose instead of endless self-defense. The shield is not an excuse to withdraw. It is a green light to build. And your fourth response is boldness. Walk with the weight of someone who knows they cannot be destroyed. Move like David walking toward Goliath, not with arrogance, but with prophetic certainty. Your voice carries more weight now, your silence more power, because behind both stands the Almighty. You should not fear loss of reputation, loss of approval, or loss of support, because what God defends, no man can dismantle. And here is the hidden response few ever mention: mercy, because now that you are shielded, you will see the backfire of attacks. You will watch enemies stumble over their own snares. You will witness those who cursed you collapse under their own curses, and your human instinct will be to laugh, to celebrate, but the shield trains you to walk higher. Your task is not to mock their downfall, but to testify of God's faithfulness. The vengeance belongs to Him, not to you. Mercy in the face of their ruin becomes the sign that you are truly covered, because you no longer need to prove yourself by their destruction. Another response: generational stewardship. You are not shielded just for yourself. You are shielded for every life tied to your destiny. That means you respond by protecting what has been entrusted to you, not wasting your covering on vanity. You respond by living like someone who is carrying a mantle too heavy to be squandered. This is why compromise is no longer an option for you. This is why distraction is deadly. This is why mediocrity insults the one who shielded you. If God is your wall, your reaction must be to become His witness. Finally, your response must be confidence. In the prophetic truth, you are not shielded temporarily. You are shielded permanently. That means you stop living like someone who is waiting for the next catastrophe. Stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Stop pacing the floor in anxiety. Instead, step into the world as a walking prophecy, a moving altar, a living sign that faith is still unshakable. Love is still stronger than fear. Destiny is still intact, and awakening cannot be canceled. Your greatest act of response is to live openly, unapologetically, gloriously, as the chosen one who cannot be pierced. Because when the